I've been feeling pretty insecure within myself lately. If you've been feeling insecure lately, if you feel like your insecurities have been running your fucking life, if faking it until you make it isn't really helping you, and you just kind of want to get out of this rut, you want to know how to feel better, how to not let your insecurities run your life and cause you to people please and self-sabotage and cause you to make decisions that compromise who you are. If you feel like you lose yourself when you fake it until you make it, and you feel like you're being a fraud because the way that you're portraying yourself isn't exactly how you're feeling inside, then this is the video for you. And I just wanted to say thank you in advance for taking the time to click on this video and to watch it, and I hope that you get whatever it is that you're seeking from this video. All right, let's get into it. Insecurity is like, it's just a part of life. It's something that every single human being will face. We have to experience it. And I feel like it's very easy to victimize yourself when you do feel insecure within yourself. And it's weird because I know today we live in a society that is very much pervaded by this idea of toxic positivity. And it's all about embracing yourself entirely for who you are. And if you have an insecurity, or you deal with self-doubt, or if you aren't the most confident person walking around, then suddenly you don't love yourself. I think you can still love yourself and have some sort of care for yourself without being completely confident in every aspect of yourself. Instead of straight up denying our insecurities, which I feel like we tend to do. I love that I run away from relationships when I feel like I'm getting too emotionally invested. I love my abandonment issues, you know, all of that in a bag of chips. I think instead of just like putting on this like fake smile and pretending like we are fully as confident as we want people on social media to think we are, or people in our everyday lives to think we are, instead of pretending to be as put together as we want to be, I think it's just easier to acknowledge our insecurities for what they are. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you really think about it, insecurities exist on a spectrum. Insecurity can be crippling. It can affect us in nearly every single avenue in our lives if we allow it to. For example, your relationship with yourself, right? Feeling unworthy, feeling undeserving, letting your past dictate your future, self-sabotaging, people-pleasing, unresolved trauma, not allowing yourself to be your authentic self, or not even knowing yourself well enough to show up as your authentic self, and being scared of finding out what that is. That's an actual thing, right? Being insecure within your relationship because you're not secure in yourself. So being scared that you're going to be abandoned, feeling like you're going to be left for someone better, feeling like maybe your partner is too good for you or you can't trust them. When you are insecure, you don't want to communicate how you're feeling because a lot of times insecurity is stigmatized. You don't want to be labeled as the insecure girl who, you know, gets upset every time her boyfriend looks at another girl, or you don't want to be the insecure guy who thinks his girlfriend's cheating on him every time she goes out to brunch with the girls or a trip to Miami, although that's questionable. Just kidding, but no one wants to be that person. So it's easier to just shut down. It's easier to ice them out and not communicate. And we all know that lack of communication is really like one of the main reasons that relationships don't work out. Like, we're not honest with each other because we don't want to be honest with ourselves because we feel embarrassed. But again, there's nothing wrong with having insecurities. We live in a world where people constantly, you know, judge one another. Even if it's unintentional, even if you don't mean any harm by it, like, people are gonna judge you. Like, that's just life. And it can be really hard when like you're trying to be vulnerable and you're trying to like be intimate with people and you want to be your authentic self, but the world keeps telling you that how you're feeling is weird or wrong, or different, and you then of course want to go into your little cocoon and hide away. And I feel like that happens in a lot of relationships, and that's caused by insecurity. Financial insecurity in your lifestyle, that's a big one, but I don't even need to say much on that because we all know. We have people who flex on social media, we have people that are actually living those lives, which is amazing, like good for you. And then we have people that are, you know, faking it, people who don't like really actually care. But a lot of us do care, and a lot of us only care about like money because we have to in order to survive. But I also think a lot of us feel pressure to care more about money and place more value on it than we personally care about because of social media and society's influence. That's very much a thing. Like, I talked about this in one of my podcast episodes where I talked about my relationship with money and how there have been times where I felt pressure to spend money on things that I didn't even want to spend money on. I'm sure most of our friends would be understanding about that, but there was always a little voice in my head that was like, I don't want to say that. Like, that feels embarrassing. That would cause me to lie. I hate lying. Like, the name of my podcast is Transparency Card. My insecurity would cause me to be a fucking liar and not be transparent, and that's what insecurity does. We can also feel insecure about just like life in general and the direction that we're going in. Are we making the right decision? Do we care about the right things? We're in our 20s, like this is the time to grind and hustle. It's the best time of your life. Like, you're supposed to live it up and fuck up and make all the mistakes possible and like stay out until 6 a.m. drunk. And then there's like the other end of the spectrum where it's like, this is your time to hustle. You're never going to be this physically fit, have, you know, this much freedom, have like no responsibility ever again in your life. So this is the time where you really need to buckle down and like get your shit together so you can create a solid foundation for your future self and your kids. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's like always that debate. For me, that's a lot. Like, that creates a lot of insecurity. Being insecure about time, feeling like you don't have enough time, feeling like the clock is against you, and feeling like a failure because you're 24 years old and you changed your career path, your entire like direction in life. Everything you thought you wanted wasn't really what you wanted. What you thought you needed isn't what you needed, and now you're in this weird space that actually feels really good, but because it doesn't fit the mold, that like ideological mold that you had created and believed that would happen for years, it feels just really weird and jarring, and you don't know if you should allow yourself to feel happiness because you actually feel really good in your situation, or are you just waiting for the other shoe to drop, or should you actually feel miserable and as stressed as you did before and keep trying to achieve that dream that really deep down inside feels meaningless to you? Anyway, there are some insecurities that we're going to downplay that actually really do affect us, right? And cause us real psychological and at times even physical harm. For example, I've worked on this insecurity, but it still does very much exist. I have this fear of being considered too much for someone, particularly in romantic relationships, but also in friendships as well, which is why I'm not a very like, I don't consistently speak to people because I just don't want to overwhelm people, and I also have a tendency to just like go into isolation mode for like months on end, and like that's just my existence. But anyway, I have this tendency to like feel like I'm gonna be too much for people, and that the second that I like let my guard down and really express how I'm feeling or allow myself to be vulnerable and intimate, cry, whatever the case may be, I have this fear that the person's just gonna leave me. It gives me a lot of anxiety. It used to really cripple me and my relationships because that fear, and that's where most insecurities stem from, right? But because of that fear, I would end up compromising my relationships because I wouldn't be honest with my partners and I wouldn't communicate what I was actually feeling. And so I would just kind of like ice them out without meaning to. And it would lead to basically the end of my relationships. That insecurity, I allowed it to take complete control over my thoughts, right, over my feelings, over my actions. I use that as fuel to make decisions, and those decisions put me in predicaments that I really had no business being in and were the opposite of what I wanted. So yes, there are insecurities like that exist that really do need to be addressed and invalidated and worked on. Real insecurities that stem from trauma. But then, right, we also have insecurities on the other end of the spectrum. Okay, for example, when I was younger, this one guy would tell me that I had a small ass for a black girl, which is like so problematic. Like, we're not even gonna get into that. But he would say like, oh, you have a small ass for a black girl, like you're not black because your ass isn't big. And like at the time, I remember feeling like uncomfortable by his statement, not because my ass was small. I own a mirror, like I know I have a small butt. I was more like offended because of the way my body was being so like openly objectified, and like the fact that we were in an environment where he felt comfortable enough to make a comment on my body as if I'm not a human being with like thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And like if I were someone else who did care a lot about my like, I mean I did care about my physical appearance, but like my body particularly could have caused like an eating disorder. That could have, you don't even know. It did like bother me a little, and I didn't realize how later on in life I had kind of like suppressed it in a way. I would just wear like baggier clothes, or I would wear like, you know, like baggy pants, like oversized sweaters, like dresses, like non-form fitting dresses, and like things like that, because I didn't like the way that he so openly objectified my body and like tried to make me feel like something was wrong with it. And so I guess in a way that was me internalizing that insecurity. However, I don't let that really dictate my life. Like, I love denim jeans. I love the way my ass looks in them. I don't mind wearing form-fitting dresses. You know, like when I was younger, I did let that affect me, but as I got older, I realized, you know what, like I'm not gonna let that dumbass comment from that dumbass man or little boy stop me from wearing what I want. You know, I'm not gonna let that dictate my choices. So that's my point. We all have insecurities, but they exist on a spectrum, and there are some that weigh heavier than others. And my point in stating all of this, talking about insecurity on a spectrum, is for us to just normalize it. Like, there's no such thing as being completely confident in every single aspect of yourself. Confidence, like, and we're going to talk about like what true authentic confidence is later. Real confidence really is accompanied by like self-awareness and acknowledgement of what actually exists, and a sort of like surrendering to your insecurity, a sort of understanding that, you know what, yeah, like I do have a small ass, and you know what, I can work with that. That's not something that's going to stop me from living my life in any way. And if that insecurity is that big for me, and I do feel like it's hindering my quality of life, then I'm going to make the necessary changes to, you know, prevent that from happening. It's completely fine to be insecure sometimes. It's completely fine to have certain insecurities. It doesn't make you any less of a confident person. But what I will say is, while we'll always experience some form of insecurity, the most important thing is to challenge and invalidate or change the ones that you feel like are hindering your quality of life. So the reason I want to have this conversation today is because I've just been feeling really insecure in myself, and I've been realizing it a lot more over the course of the past 3 months for a variety of reasons that I don't even know if I'm ready to like share on camera yet. Buy me a drink and maybe you'll get it out of me. It's just been such a wild emotional roller coaster. I went through like waves of healing, and then like waves of depression, waves of self-doubt, and then waves of like really high confidence. And it's just been like a lot emotionally, but like I'm thankful for all of it, because now coming out of it on the other end, I'm so proud of the person that I am now, and I know exactly why all of those things happened. Like the main lesson, the main takeaway from that period of reflection and healing, a lot of it stemmed from insecurity. And the way I realized this was actually through interacting with other people. I am surrounded by a lot of fire signs. And so for those of you that aren't into astrology, long story short, what I'm saying is I'm surrounded by very confident people. Like my best friend, my mom's boyfriend, my boyfriend, a lot of my friends, like they're all just very confident people. And recently I've just had an influx of meeting new, really confident people. I think that's another beautiful thing, because when you have people in your life, people kind of serve as mirrors for you. So you either like witness something in a person that you dislike, but it's really something that you dislike in yourself, and that's projection, obviously. But then other times you see things in another person that you admire, and you may begin to feel insecure. You may begin to compare yourself to that person. You may find yourself unnecessarily judging that person or feeling jealous of that person. I'm not gonna sit here and be like,
oh, I've never been jealous, like I'm not a jealous person.
But I will say that the people that I'm referring to, it wasn't jealousy that really helped me realize how insecure I was. It was really through admiration. So for example, my partner is like a very confident person. Like he's very sure of himself, and he's very assertive about what he wants in life, and he's unapologetically himself. He'll show up in any room being exactly who he is. His character is very stable, and I never have to question him. Whereas with me, I would say that I'm more of a chameleon. Like I adapt well to every single environment and to different people, and I think that's actually a really beautiful thing, and that's a skill. However, I do have a tendency to like people please. And I thought it was something that I had completely gotten rid of. Like I realized how toxic and horrible it was for me and my mental health, but it's still something that I battle with and that I have to consistently be aware of. And I have to remind myself to be intentional in the answers that I give to people and how I interact with people, to be sure that I'm not compromising myself. But that's something that just comes so naturally to him. My best friend, she's like this fun, sweet, like silly, intelligent girl, and she's like very bubbly, and we're best friends, and everyone that meets us, they're like, you guys are so bubbly, you're always laughing, you're always smiling. And when people will call me bubbly, I get offended, because I'm like, oh, like you're basically like calling me stupid and like you don't respect me. Like if someone called her bubbly, like she'd just be like, okay, what about it? Like who gives a fuck, you know what I mean? And she's comfortable like laughing at herself and acknowledging that she has a silly side. She's like comfortable with herself, you know what I mean? I realize that when we like have conversations, a lot of the times it's me degrading myself like in a joking way, which is still not healthy, and her just like telling me to stop doing it. And I took a step back and realized like I've never heard her like insult herself, not once, since we've been friends. And even if she's been like, yeah, I was such a dumbass in that situation, it was so lighthearted, and I just could sense like there was no judgment or shame in her, you know, demeanor when she spoke about herself. And that made me realize like, wow, I judge myself really critically, like to the point where I think that other people are judging me as hard as I'm judging myself. And I realized that a lot of these thoughts, a lot of the feelings that I was experiencing just stemmed from straight up insecurity and fear of not being enough, of not being worthy of greatness, of good things, of fear of being abandoned. So many different fears that I would let dictate my life, like fear of confrontation, all of that. And it's crazy because like their confidence is so bright, like it's actually contagious, and being around these people just inspires me to like want to be as confident as they are and want to show up for myself the way they show up for themselves. It really was kind of mind-boggling, the stark contrast I recognized between myself and these people that I love so dearly. What I realized is these people aren't afraid to take up space in a room because they walk into a room like they own it and they know they deserve to be there. And I realize a lot of the time I don't walk into a room, I tiptoe into a room, and I try not to step on any toes. I try to shrink myself down, and I would try to dim my light because I didn't want to offend anyone, or I didn't want to make anyone feel insecure. I didn't want to deal with confrontation. And I would really like compromise myself, belittle myself, and underserve myself. And now I'm realizing that I deserve to be in that room as much as the next person. But I'm still insecure as fuck. Don't get it twisted. So the theory is that insecurity can be incredibly damaging, but I argue that insecurity isn't what is damaging. It's us giving our power over to insecurity that ruins us. I think it also comes down to really knowing what matters to you in your life and figuring out, or like deciphering, which insecurities you actually do need to address and fix in order to get you to that next level of confidence, instead of allowing yourself to just continue to be in that same state of insecurity when you know it's not helping you in any way. There are some insecurities that you're gonna have to live with, and recognize that those smaller insecurities really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. For example, like having a smaller butt. In the grand scheme of my life, my mentality is always this: like, if I'm not gonna worry about it on my deathbed, if I'm not gonna look back on my life and regret it, then I don't need to worry about it now. What I will regret on my deathbed is not chasing after my dreams, is not taking the time out to become the person that I wanted to be, is not taking risks, is not being the bigger person, is not forgiving other people. Like, those are things I would regret. I won't regret, you know, not getting ass shots. And I'm not shaming anyone, but it's just, you know what I mean? Like, there are bigger things happening in the world. You know what I mean? But if something like, you know, really deeply affects you, and it could have been something that when you were younger never really fazed you, but you had other people in your life projecting their insecurity onto you. For example, like, I used to hold, like, made fun of because I was dark. That did actually hurt me, because most of like my family on my mom's side was lighter skinned, and I always felt like the literal black sheep in the family. And so in school, and I got bullied for being dark, like, that really did affect me for a while. But now looking back on it, I know that person was just very deeply insecure in himself, because I grew up with him and I saw how he, like, he's better now, but like how he was, like, how he kind of turned out in high school, and like the decisions that he would make, and that showed me just how deeply insecure he was, and how he needed to get a rise out of me or try to make me feel low about myself in order to validate his own feelings. Like I was saying, like, there are going to be some things that like never even matter to you that other people will bring up, that society will make you feel, you know, less than worthy for having, or for believing in, or for thinking. For example, if you have an opinion on something and it's the opposite of popular opinion. Today we live in this culture where it's like you can't even state your opinion without being canceled, without being ostracized, without like being fired from your fucking job. Like, it's crazy. And so of course it's gonna be like really hard to like not want to be your true authentic self and say how you really feel if it doesn't fit within the guidelines of what's socially acceptable. So a lot of times, like, those insecurities really are just a result of social conditioning and years of people in your life and the media telling you that you're different and you're strange and there's something wrong with you, when those things from when you were little never matter to you, have nothing to do with your morals and principles and values in life. And those are the things that you have to work on to not let affect you, is what I'm saying. Like, if someone were to tell me, like, I think you're ignorant, I'm going to work on not being ignorant then. I'm going to educate myself so that way no one can say that to me again. Or so that way I know that, you know, I'm making progress and becoming a better person and becoming a more aware and understanding and empathetic person and a more thoughtful person. Because I don't want to be ignorant. It's important to me that I do show up for myself and other people, and that I am kind, and that I am aware of what's going on in the world. That matters to me. So if someone commented that to me, then I need to figure out how to fix that, because that's not good. But if someone were to tell me like, hey, like you need to lose 20 pounds, first of all, go fuck yourself. Who are you? And second of all, I'm comfortable with my body at the moment. So, and like, I just don't think my worth lies here. Like, I know I have so much more to offer than my body. So it really just comes down to knowing what really matters to you, and then whatever you feel like is hindering you from getting to that next level of confidence. Like if your physical appearance really does matter to you that much, then take that initiative and get in the gym. Take that initiative and start eating clean. You know, it's really all within your power. It's very easy when you feel insecure about yourself to like victimize yourself, because you think like that you're powerless, but you only feel powerless because you gave away your power to your insecurity. But you can always take it back. It's always just in your head, right? Not always. Like there are some real assholes that'll try to drill that into you, and like there's societal pressures, absolutely. But when you recognize what matters to you, when you recognize what's going to sustain you and add to your quality of life, and you prioritize that, it becomes a lot easier to decipher what insecurities to magnify and which ones to just like let be, you know, or just let it go, you know? I did mention, you know, finding yourself and like kind of like figuring out what matters to you, and like using that as a guide to pulling yourself out of that insecure space. Another tactic that has helped me, and I know a lot of people also use this tactic, is false confidence, which is basically just like faking it till you make it, because like it's like tricking your brain and eventually you'll believe it. Now, I believe there are like definitely a lot of pros and cons to this, because for one, the pros are like you are creating a persona. And I'm gonna actually read what I wrote here because it's pretty good, if I do say so myself. You create a persona that you can step into, and once you have identified with this part of yourself, your insecure self really has to be checked at the door, because during this time, this persona is all you care about portraying, and this persona is probably what's going to get you through the right doors. Your persona focuses more on the present, it focuses more on logic rather than emotional baggage and fear, procrastination. That persona, when you step into it, you're on. You have created this identity. Well, really, it's not, a persona isn't even a creation of an identity. It is just a part of your identity that you are magnifying. It's just a part of you that you're stepping into and being consistent with. So for example, I'm gonna use like such a weird example, but like a few months ago, I was watching this interview with Saweetie, and she was talking about how like there's Diamante, her real name, and then Saweetie, and how Saweetie is a persona. So Diamante has her own personal shit going on. She could have anxiety, she could be having nervous breakdowns, whatever. The second she has to get on stage, the second she has to go handle business, she steps into Saweetie mode. She steps into that persona. That definitely is a good thing, I would say, because it helps you just like get shit done, and it really does help you get closer to your goals a lot of the time. Say you just went through a breakup and like you have to go to work the next day. You have to like put on that mask and like show up and do what you need to do. And even though like some can argue like, yeah, but that's like harmful, like we should be allowed to express ourselves whenever and wherever. Yeah, that's true. But if we always submit to our emotions, if I was to always submit to my emotions, I would just like, I would literally, like I would just like cry myself to death. And you can't always let your emotions control you, and you have to also move with logic. Of course, I'm not saying invalidate your feelings, don't take time for your feelings, because honey, my favorite hobby is crying, like come on. But what I am saying is like there are gonna be times where you do have to like suck it up respectfully and get shit done. And that's what I think is really cool about having something to look forward to, or letting external things kind of force you out of that space. Because If you like let your emotions run you, you're just thinking about yourself and how you feel and what's going on in your world. But when you have to go to work or you have to go pick up your kid from daycare, you have to get out of that rut, that emotional space you're in, because you have to act. You have to do it. You have to Nike that shit. You have to just do it. You know what I mean? It's really cool to me, and I really love that, because like when you step into a persona, it's just like you're really checking your emotions at the door, and you're like, I'll be back for you later, boo, but I have business to take care of. There were so many times that I was dealing with personal issues while working at my last job, and like that didn't matter. I still woke up and like I'd be crying while I was doing my makeup, but once that concealer was on, I didn't shed a tear, boo. I would be actually walking to work and have like tears in my eyes, and I would just like take a napkin and dab my eyes, and then the elevator door would open and I'd be like,
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Would you like some coffee?
I think that's like necessary though. Like I think there are just gonna be times in your life where you're gonna have to just like suck it up in the moment. The beneficial part of doing that though is not that you feel like you're dying inside and like you're just trying to hold it together for the sake of other people. It's not that, because if you're really like going through it, I don't think that it's healthy that you like pretend like you're okay. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying like hide your pain all the time, but I do think that it gets you out of your head. Acting, it just gets you out of your head. Like there have been so many times I've thought myself into a depression just by like sitting in my room and like talking down on myself and like assuming things about other people, that other people were thinking these things about me. And then I would go outside and breathe some fresh air and be like, there's a whole world out here. And then I would talk to those people and ask them if my insecurities were valid, and they'd be like, no, I didn't even think of that like that. Like no one was thinking that. I wasn't even thinking about you. Sometimes like it's just good to get back in touch with reality, and I think that a persona does that, is what I'm saying. Here's the issue that I've personally had with faking it until I make it. You can become really accustomed to faking it. And the thing with that is, if you aren't doing the internal work to match the facade that you're putting out, like if you're not at least like actively behind the scenes working towards becoming that person, like for example, shadow work or affirmations, or like going on that diet, or like taking the initiative to work out every day, or being intentional with how you spend your money, or whatever it is. If you're not taking initiative and doing those real life actions that are going to get you closer to becoming that persona that you've created, what can happen is, let me speak for myself, I would feel worse about myself, because it's like now I feel like a fucking fraud. They say like fake it till you make it, meaning you're faking it in the moment, you're not there completely yet, but the last part, until you make it, meaning you are still like actively progressing, you are still making decisions and on a journey to becoming. And if you're not on a journey to becoming and you're just faking it, then you're being a fraud and you're being inauthentic, and that's when you really begin to dislike yourself, because now like you're putting on this facade, not even for you to boost your confidence, but to make other people like you and be validated by them when you feel miserable doing it. Clearly it doesn't matter that much to you if you're not like putting in, or at least trying to become that person, if that makes sense. I've lost myself faking it, and it wasn't until I spent time with really authentic people that weren't afraid to make mistakes, that didn't people please, that stood their ground, that showed up as themselves unapologetically in every room, people who weren't afraid to ask for help, people who were comfortable admitting that they didn't have it all together, people who didn't give up regardless. Then I realized I wasn't fucking confident at all because I thought that being confident meant that you just had it all together, or you were really good at acting like you had it all together and like you had all the answers. And while walking into a room like you own it is a part of confidence, a lot of humility comes with true confidence, and a lot of authenticity accompanies confidence as well. So the real definition of confidence, at least what I've come to define it as, just based off of like the people in my life and what feels most true to me, really is, and I'm gonna read this list, You aren't afraid to make mistakes. You're comfortable making mistakes because you know that you're a human being and you know that you're learning, and a large part of learning is making mistakes and then being corrected. You don't judge yourself for not being perfect because you know that's unrealistic. You know perfection is unrealistic. You know that you're also just doing the best that you can. So you're moving with humility. You are being graceful towards yourself. You are being forgiving towards yourself. You are being kind to yourself and empathetic and understanding that you're in the process of learning something new, and you're not shaming yourself for being just a human. So not being afraid to make mistakes, like key trait of a confident person, swear to God. You are aware of yourself. You are aware of what you stand for. You have morals and values and principles that you live by and that you don't compromise for anyone. You let those guiding principles dictate or guide your decisions and how you navigate your life and your relationships at work, all of that. You don't compromise who you are because you know who you are and you stand by that. And even though, you know, we're human and we're subject to change, and sometimes our morals change, sometimes what we value changes, that's perfectly fine. You're still very adamant about those things. You don't switch up for the sake of other people. You switch up because it felt like the right decision for you, essentially. You show up authentically as yourself. Now, I'm not saying you like showed up to work in your pajamas, like drool on your chin, but I am saying there's a consistency in who you are. You know how they say like the way you do one thing is the way you do everything? It's so true, because I've been thinking about this. Like, I can be really inconsistent. I can be really inconsistent with people, and I realize that reflects in my work. One of the reasons I stopped posting on YouTube was because I wasn't seeing much like progress, and I realize now it's because I wasn't being consistent, and I have a real issue with consistency and like discipline if I'm not getting immediate results. And I also realized that me being inconsistent isn't just something I've noticed in my work. I can also be inconsistent with people in my life and not communicating as often. And so that's something I'm working on, trying to get back to people as soon as I can, trying to message like at least one person a day, because I want to build consistency in every aspect of my life. When you're a truly confident person, there's something about your character that is just very consistent. If I were to go ask your best friend like what you're like, you know, I might get a similar response as if I were to ask your coworker or like your boss. Of course, those are all like very different relationships, but there's something about you that's just very consistent, whether it be like you're just a very honest person, or you always are willing to help somebody out when they need it. And there's just something about you that's like really consistent. You're just you wherever you go. We're always going to adapt to situations and habituate ourselves, but at the end of the day, who you are remains consistent. I feel like that's what confidence is. Like, you know who you are are unapologetic about who you are, as long as it's not hurting other people. You know, you can hold yourself accountable to, like I said, humility.
Anywhere you go, you belong.
The point in this conversation was really trying to figure out like how can we go from being insecure and like using the method of faking it until you make it to actually become confident people. And I think the answer is just like very in the middle. You just have to realize what's important to you and then actively make the decision to let those principles guide you. And we have to let ourselves be imperfect, because there's not a single human being on this planet that is perfect. At the end of the day, we are all just doing the best that we can. I'm doing the best that I can. It was so hard to film this video because so much shit went wrong before like I got this camera on, and my life is by nowhere near perfect. I feel like all those people that are like, oh, I thought I'd like be married with kids at 25 and I was nowhere near that. Like, yeah, that's literally how I feel right now. And you know what? Like, if this were me a few years ago, I would have fucking hated myself and I would have been so nasty and mean to myself. But now it's like, although I do have some insecurities about where I am in life, I know that I'm doing the best that I can, that everyone has a different journey, and that a lot of people have actually been on a similar path as I am right now, where you change your mind about so many things and everything you thought you wanted just kind of went out the window when you're in this new reality, but it's not what you wanted, but it's what you needed, and it's exactly what you needed, and it just fits and it's right. And we're all just, again, like, we're all truly just doing the best that we can. So I think just like, one, extending yourself some compassion and empathy. Like, this world is not easy to exist in, and you are a fucking trooper for existing in it, first of all. Two, you're deserving of love, and you're worthy of good things just for existing. And also, there's nothing wrong with faking it until you make it if you're putting in the work to become that person. You have to give yourself something to look forward to, and that persona can be exactly that. So it just comes down to like being real with yourself about what you want and taking action and taking your power back from your insecurities. What insecurities are stopping you from living the life that you want, or for being the person that you want to be? And what insecurities really don't matter that much to you, but society makes you feel like you should care about those things, you know? So think about it. I don't know. This is just food for thought. My cats are being crackheads right now, so I'm gonna end the video out, but it was so great speaking with you. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. I really appreciate it. Like, seriously, even if one person watches this, like, thank you so much. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day or night. Okay, bye.
Anywhere you go.